Flames surrounded her inside the barn. Then a cowboy kicked the doors down and rushed in. Early morning light stretched slowly across the wide ranch, painting the fields with soft gold while the air still carried the cool calm of night. The land felt peaceful, almost silent, except for distant birds and the quiet sounds of animals waking for the day. It was the kind of morning that made everything feel steady and predictable, the kind of morning where nothing seemed capable of going wrong. She arrived at the barn just after sunrise, walking along a dirt path that curved through the pasture. Her boots pressed into the dry ground, leaving small marks behind her as she moved with purpose. This routine had become familiar to her over the past few months. Every morning she checked the animals, inspected the equipment, and made sure everything was ready before the rest of the ranch fully came alive. The barn itself stood tall and weathered, built from strong wooden beams that showed years of use. Sunlight slipped through small gaps in the walls, creating thin lines of light across the hay-covered floor. Dust floated gently in the air, glowing where the light touched it. To most people, it was just an old structure, but to her it had become a place of comfort. Somewhere she felt useful again. She paused near the entrance and took a deep breath, smelling hay, leather, and warm earth. These scents had once felt unfamiliar, but now they grounded her. Before coming here, her life had been uncertain. She had left behind a busy city, searching for something quieter, something real. The ranch had given her space to breathe and time to rebuild herself. Inside, several horses turned their heads toward her, recognizing the sound of her footsteps. She greeted them softly, her voice gentle and calm. She moved from stall to stall, checking feed buckets and water supplies. One horse nudged her shoulder lightly and she smiled, scratching behind its ear before continuing her work. Outside, the ranch was slowly waking. A truck engine started in the distance, and somewhere a gate closed with a metallic sound. The cowboy who owned the ranch had already begun his morning rounds. He was known for speaking little but noticing everything. From afar, he watched the property carefully, ensuring that both people and animals stayed safe. She respected him, though their conversations were often short and practical. Inside the barn, she climbed a short ladder to inspect stacked hay bales. She checked for moisture or damage, making notes in a small notebook she carried. Details mattered here. A small problem ignored could become something much bigger later. As she worked, a faint smell lingered in the air, something slightly sharper than usual. She paused, sniffing again, unsure what it was.
At first she assumed it came from equipment or dust.
The barn held many scents, and not all of them were easy to identify. She shrugged lightly and returned to her tasks. A soft crackling sound followed a few minutes later. It was quiet, almost hidden beneath the shifting of wood and the movements of animals. She glanced upward toward the rafters, seeing nothing unusual. The barn was old, and small sounds were normal. She moved on, focusing on cleaning tools near the far wall. Outside, wind began to pick up gently, pushing warm air through the open doors. The sky remained clear, and nothing hinted at danger. Ranch hands continued their work without concern, unaware of what was slowly beginning inside. She finished organizing one section and turned toward another corner where extra hay was stored. As she walked closer, she noticed a thin line of smoke rising behind the stacked bales. At first her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. Smoke seemed out of place, almost unreal against the calm morning. She stepped closer, squinting to make sure her eyes were not playing tricks. The smell grew stronger, sharper now. A small flame flickered between pieces of dry straw, weak but alive. For a moment she stood frozen, trying to decide how serious it was. Fires could start and die quickly, she thought. Maybe she could put it out herself. She grabbed a nearby bucket, looking for water, but realized it was empty. Turning quickly, she searched for another option, feeling her heartbeat begin to rise. The flame spread faster than she expected, feeding on dry hay and growing taller with each passing second. Heat began to push against her face. She stepped back, suddenly aware that the situation was changing rapidly. She called out loudly, hoping someone outside might hear her, but her voice disappeared into the thick wooden structure. The horses sensed the shift before she fully understood it. They grew restless, stamping their hooves and pulling against their ropes. One horse let out a sharp sound that echoed through the barn. The crackling noise grew louder as flames climbed upward along the hay. She moved quickly toward the main door, intending to run outside and get help, but smoke drifted across her path, making her cough. She covered her mouth with her sleeve and tried again, staying low as she remembered basic safety advice. The air felt heavier, harder to breathe. A wave of uncertainty rushed through her. She had handled challenges before, but this felt different. Fire moved unpredictably, and the barn's dry materials gave it strength. She tried to stay calm, telling herself to think clearly, to move carefully. She turned back toward the horses, unsure whether to free them or focus on escaping first. The responsibility she felt toward the animals made her hesitate. She rushed toward one stall, fumbling with a latch, but heat forced her to step away again. Outside, the morning remained peaceful, almost unaware of the danger growing within the barn walls. A faint trail of smoke began to rise above the roof, blending with the bright sky. It would not remain unnoticed for long, but at this moment, she felt alone with the problem. She moved deeper into the barn, searching for another exit, her eyes watering from the smoke. Flames spread along the edges of hay piles, crackling louder now. The sound filled the space, creating an overwhelming sense of urgency. Her thoughts raced. She remembered lessons about staying low, about finding clear air near the ground. She crouched slightly, trying to steady her breathing. Each second felt longer than the last. She called for help again, louder this time, her voice strained but determined. Somewhere inside, she held on to hope that someone would hear her, that she would not have to face this alone. The fire continued to grow, slowly turning a peaceful morning into a dangerous struggle. Outside, distant footsteps began moving closer as smoke finally caught someone's attention. But inside, she still did not know that help was coming. She only knew that she needed to keep moving, keep thinking, and keep believing that she would find a way out before the flames closed in around her. The fire inside the barn grew faster than she expected. What had started as a small flicker had now spread along the dry hay bales and wooden beams. Thick smoke curled upward, making it difficult to see anything clearly. Her eyes watered, and each breath felt heavier than the last. She remembered the safety advice she had been told before. Stay low, cover your mouth, and keep moving toward the nearest exit. But every step she tried to take brought new obstacles. The horses in the barn became increasingly restless. One horse pulled against its rope, neighing loudly as the heat and smoke reached it. Another shuffled nervously, its hooves scraping against the wooden floor. She paused for a moment, unsure whether to free them or focus solely on her escape. She knew she couldn't calm them while also escaping quickly, but leaving them behind went against everything she believed in. She made a quick decision to keep moving, promising herself she would try to save them if there was any chance later. She moved toward a corner of the barn where the roof sloped lower. Smoke and heat pressed against her face, and she coughed violently. Her sleeve was pulled over her mouth, but it only helped a little. Her eyes stung, and her vision blurred as she tried to keep track of where she was going. The flames licked at the edges of the hay bales near her, and the sound of cracking wood echoed overhead. It was hard to tell if parts of the structure were about to fall. Suddenly, she heard a voice from outside. Suddenly. It was distant, but it cut through the roar of the fire. "Is anyone in there?" Someone shouted. Relief and fear mixed in her chest. She wanted to call back, but the smoke made it nearly impossible to speak. She coughed again and waved her arms in the direction of the sound, hoping whoever it was could see her. Meanwhile, outside the barn, workers and ranch hands had finally noticed the smoke rising. They had been going about their morning tasks, unaware that danger had started inside the building. When they saw the dark column of smoke, they shouted to one another and ran toward the barn. One of them called emergency services while others grabbed hoses and buckets, preparing to fight the flames as best they could. The cowboy who owned the ranch had been checking fences in another field. When he saw the smoke, his instincts kicked in immediately. He dropped the tools he was carrying and sprinted toward the barn. As he approached, he could see the flames through gaps in the barn walls. He didn't wait for anyone else to give instructions. Someone might be trapped inside, and he knew every second mattered. Inside, she struggled to keep moving. Inside, she struggled to keep moving. The flame seemed to shift unpredictably, blocking some paths and opening others. She kept low to the ground, trying to stay below the densest smoke. Her hands were blackened with soot from touching walls and hay as she searched for a safe way out. The barn had always felt like a safe place, but now it had turned into something threatening. The sound of the fire was deafening. Each snap and crack of burning wood made her jump, and she feared that part of the roof might collapse at any moment. She ducked under a low beam, her heart racing as she tried to ignore the fear that threatened to paralyze her. She knew that panicking would only make things worse. She took slow, deliberate breaths, focusing on the exit even though it seemed farther than ever. Outside, the cowboy had reached the side of the barn where the flames appeared smaller. Other ranch hands called for him to wait, to stay back for safety, but he ignored them. He could hear faint noises inside, maybe a voice, maybe movement. He approached a side door and looked through a small gap. He could see a figure crouched near the hay bales. It was the woman. Without hesitation, he kicked the door. The heavy wooden door resisted at first, but he kicked again with all his strength. The door burst open, and a wave of heat hit him immediately. Smoke rushed out, stinging his eyes and filling his lungs. Still, he kept moving, crouching low and moving quickly toward the figure he had seen. She saw movement from the corner of her eye and realized someone was inside. Hope surged through her as she called out weakly, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames. The cowboy's presence was a relief she hadn't realized she needed. She felt herself trembling both from fear and from the knowledge that someone was here to help her. The cowboy reached her side, his face covered with a cloth to protect against smoke, and his voice calm but firm. "Follow me. Stay low and keep moving." She nodded, too exhausted and frightened to speak. She trusted him completely, relying on his strength and experience to guide her out of the fire. Together, they moved toward another doorway. Flames had blocked the main exit, so they needed to find a secondary path. Each step was careful. Pieces of burning wood fell around them, and thick smoke threatened to overwhelm them. He shielded her with his body when necessary, making sure she stayed close and kept moving. The horses inside continued to panic. She tried to ignore them, focusing on the path to safety. Her mind raced with worry for the animals, but the immediate concern was getting out alive. The cowboy's calm presence gave her the courage to keep going, even when the fire seemed impossible to escape. Outside, other ranch hands prepared to help once they got the woman and the cowboy out. Hoses were ready, and some had blankets to wrap her in as soon as she emerged from the smoke. The sound of sirens began in the distance, bringing additional hope. Inside, every step was dangerous. The fire shifted, heat radiated from every direction, and smoke made it hard to see. The woman stayed close to the cowboy, following his lead without hesitation. He reminded her to stay low, to take small breaths, and to keep moving despite the fear that filled her chest. The heat intensified as they neared the doorway they hoped would lead outside. She felt herself faltering, but his hand on her shoulder kept her steady. She moved forward with him, pushing herself past exhaustion and panic. Each step was a victory against the flames that threatened to trap her. Finally, they reached the opening. She could see the bright morning light outside, a contrast to the darkness and smoke inside. The cowboy guided her carefully through the doorway. Outside, fresh air hit her like a wave. She coughed and gasped, overwhelmed by relief and exhaustion. Workers rushed forward, wrapping her in a blanket and checking for injuries. The cowboy stepped back, watching her safely away from the burning barn. He was tired and coughing, but he had kept her safe. Outside, the fire was still dangerous, but the priority was clear. She was out, and she was alive. In those moments, she realized how close she had come to losing everything. The barn, the animals, and her own safety had all been threatened in minutes. But thanks to the cowboy's quick action, she had escaped. The smoke and fire continued to rise behind them, but for the first time in what felt like hours, she felt hope. She looked at the cowboy, her eyes filled with gratitude. He simply nodded, brushing ash from his jacket and giving her a reassuring look. Words were not necessary. In that moment, they both knew that quick thinking, courage, and trust had saved her life. As firefighters and emergency responders arrived, the barn became secondary to the safety of the people inside. The fire was intense, but the damage would be something the ranch could repair over time. The focus now was on making sure everyone was safe, and she was finally able to breathe without the immediate threat of flames pressing around her. For the woman, the morning that had begun peacefully had turned into one of the most frightening experiences of her life. But she survived, and standing there, wrapped in a blanket and surrounded by people who cared, she knew that she would never forget the bravery that had saved her life. The air outside the barn was thick with smoke and heat. Even though she had escaped the worst of it, her lungs burned, and each breath felt heavy. The morning sun streamed through the smoke, turning the rising haze into a golden mist. Her body shook from exhaustion, fear, and relief all at once. She looked around and saw the cowboy standing a few steps away, still covered in ash, his eyes scanning the barn to make sure no one else was trapped. His calmness gave her strength, even when she felt weak. Workers and ranch hands had gathered around, some holding hoses, others carrying blankets and water. They moved quickly, prepared to assist anyone who had been inside. She realized how close she had come to a real disaster. The barn, a place she had always felt safe, had almost trapped her forever. She shivered despite the warmth of the sun. Relief and fear collided inside her, leaving her unable to speak at first. The cowboy came closer and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's okay now. You're safe," he said calmly. His voice was firm, reassuring, and steady. She nodded, her voice failing her, and let him guide her a little further away from the barn. The heat from the flames was intense, and sparks occasionally drifted onto the ground around them, reminding her that danger still lingered. She tried to catch her breath, coughing as smoke escaped her lungs. She realized she had been holding it for far too long while moving through the thick air inside the barn. The cowboy handed her a small bottle of water, which she drank gratefully. The cool liquid helped her feel alive, though her body still trembled from fear. Around them, the other ranch hands worked efficiently, moving supplies and preparing to fight the fire if it spread further. Inside, the barn was now fully consumed by flames. Bright orange and red tongues of fire licked the beams and hay bales, sending thick plumes of smoke into the sky. She could hear the crackling of wood and the shifting of debris. It was a frightening sound, but being outside gave her a new perspective. She no longer felt trapped. She could see the open fields beyond the barn, the safety of space between her and the danger. She noticed the horses, still tied in their stalls or moving nervously. Some had been guided outside by the ranch hands, and a few others remained inside, restless and frightened. The smell of smoke and charred wood filled the air, making the animals uneasy. She wanted to run back and help them, but the cowboy stopped her gently. "We'll get them out safely. First, you need to recover," he said. His words carried authority but also care. She trusted him completely. Emergency services arrived quickly, their sirens cutting through the morning air. Firefighters jumped into action, connecting hoses to nearby water sources and aiming jets of water at the roaring fire. She watched in awe as the flames began to shrink slightly under their skilled efforts. It was clear that the barn would be damaged, but her relief deepened, knowing the professionals were now handling the blaze. As the fire was controlled, she finally allowed herself to think about what had just happened. Her mind replayed the moments inside the barn, the crackling flames, the choking smoke, the fear of being trapped. Every detail felt vivid. She realized how quickly life could change, how a single spark could turn a routine morning into a life-threatening event. Her heart raced again at the memory, but she also felt gratitude she had survived. The cowboy stayed near her, keeping an eye on her reactions. He did not speak much, letting the workers and firefighters manage the situation. Yet his presence alone provided comfort. She finally managed to speak, her voice soft and trembling. I don't know how to thank you," she said. He shook his head slightly, his expression serious but calm. "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same. You're safe now. That's what matters." His words were simple, but they carried weight. She understood that his bravery had not been about recognition. It had been about responsibility and instinct. She began to move closer to the barn, staying just out of reach of the flames. The smell of burnt hay and smoke filled her nostrils, a reminder of how close she had come to disaster. The barn, once a familiar and comforting place, was now a dangerous memory etched into her mind. She looked at the structure with a mixture of fear and fascination, recognizing how powerful the fire had been, yet grateful that no lives had been lost. The workers helped guide the remaining animals outside, calming them with gentle words and soft movements. The horses were still uneasy, but with care they began to settle. She felt a pang of guilt for leaving them behind initially, but she knew the cowboy had been right. Prioritizing her own safety had been necessary. Watching the animals now, safe and gradually calming, brought her a sense of peace. The sun climbed higher, and the morning heat mixed with the residual warmth from the fire. Smoke continued to rise, but it became thinner as the fire was controlled. She realized that time had slowed inside the barn, every second stretched by fear, but outside, the world continued as it always had. Fields swayed in the breeze, birds moved from branch to branch, and the ranch continued its morning tasks. Life had gone on despite the danger that had erupted just moments before. The cowboy guided her to a shaded area, away from the heat and smoke. He handed her another drink of water, and she drank slowly, feeling the cool liquid settle her stomach. Her hands shook less now, and her breathing began to normalize. She felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her muscles trembling from adrenaline and stress. As she rested, she noticed the reactions of the other workers. They moved with purpose, some checking equipment, others tending to animals, and a few speaking quietly about what had happened. Everyone seemed aware of how close things had come to turning tragic. The sense of community, the shared responsibility and quick action created a feeling of unity. She felt lucky to be part of this group, to have people who cared about one another in moments of danger. Her mind wandered back to the moment the cowboy had entered the barn. The courage it had taken to step into the fire for her safety amazed her. She realized that bravery did not always come with fanfare or recognition. Often, it was quiet, deliberate, and selfless. His calm and determined actions had kept her alive, guiding her step by step out of danger. The fire had left its mark, both on the barn and on her mind. Yet there was a strange sense of relief in surviving something so intense. She understood, more than ever, that life could change in an instant, and that courage and care from others could make all the difference. She knew she would remember this morning for the rest of her life, not just for the fear, but for the hope and bravery she had witnessed firsthand. As the firefighters continued to work, she took a moment to thank them quietly. Their presence, along with the ranch workers and the cowboy, had created a chain of help that had saved her. The experience was overwhelming, yet it showed her the importance of calm, focus, and teamwork during crisis. She looked back at the barn one last time, the fire slowly dying, the structure weakened but standing. Smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals, and the sound of crackling became less urgent. For a moment everything felt surreal. The calm fields, the rising sun, and the remnants of a fire that could have taken so much away. The cowboy stayed nearby, watching carefully, as if ensuring nothing else went wrong. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and respect for him. Words were not enough to describe the relief and thankfulness she felt. The morning had been terrifying, but it had also shown her the kindness, courage, and responsibility of people willing to risk themselves for others. By the time the firefighters had controlled the remaining flames, she had regained some composure. She walked slowly around the perimeter, checking that the animals were safe and stable. The ranch hands helped her, offering support and words of encouragement. She realized that the events of the morning had drawn everyone closer, strengthening bonds and showing the true character of those around her. The experience would remain vivid in her memory. The heat, the smoke, the fear, and the courage. But more than anything, she would remember the calm presence of the cowboy, his steady guidance, and the relief of seeing the sun once again without the immediate threat of fire. She had survived, and through the bravery of another, She had been given a second chance to continue her life on the ranch. The fire in the barn had started to die down, but the smell of smoke still hung heavily in the air. Ash floated lazily across the fields, carried by the morning breeze. She stood a few steps away from the building, wrapped in a blanket provided by one of the ranch hands. Her hands still trembled from the adrenaline of escaping, and her clothes were covered in soot. Each breath reminded her of the danger she had faced, but being outside in the fresh air brought relief she could hardly describe. The cowboy remained close by, his gaze scanning the barn carefully. He didn't speak much, but his presence gave her confidence. She realized that he had been the steady force guiding her through the chaos, and even now his calm vigilance offered reassurance. Around them, the ranch hands moved quickly, tending to animals and helping extinguish the remaining flames that flickered in hidden corners. Some horses had been brought outside already, though a few were still uneasy, their ears twitching and nostrils flaring at the smell of smoke. The woman wanted to check on them to make sure they were truly safe, but she had to focus on herself first. The cowboy noticed her concern and nodded toward the workers handling the animals. "They're fine now. Let them calm down before you worry too much," he said quietly. She nodded, grateful for his understanding. Firefighters arrived with their trucks and equipment, moving quickly to control the remaining embers. Hoses sprayed water across the barn's roof and walls, turning the air near the structure thick with steam. The sound of rushing water and shouting filled the space, but it was a welcome noise, a sign that the danger was finally under control. She watched, amazed at the efficiency of the response, and felt thankful that no one else had been harmed. The barn, once a place of routine and comfort, was now charred and blackened. The banet, wooden beams leaned awkwardly, and piles of burnt hay smoldered on the ground. She felt a pang of sadness seeing the damage, remembering how familiar and safe the barn had once felt. But the relief of being alive far outweighed any material loss. She had survived, and that was all that truly mattered. The cowboy guided her a little further away, ensuring she stayed clear of falling debris. "Take your time," he said softly. "You need to recover before doing anything else." She allowed herself to lean against a fence post, feeling her body relax slightly for the first time since the fire began. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun and the safety of open space calm her racing thoughts. Workers moved among the animals, speaking gently to soothe their nerves. She noticed a young colt shivering, its legs trembling as it adjusted to being outside. One of the ranch hands knelt beside it, stroking its mane and speaking softly, until it began to settle. Watching this reminded her that even after chaos, patience and care could bring order back to life. She began to replay the moments inside the barn in her mind. The heat, the smoke, the fear, and the feeling of being trapped. Every second had stretched endlessly, each choice carrying weight. She realized how quickly life could change, how fragile safety could be. Yet amid that fear, she also remembered the courage of the cowboy, the calm determination that had guided her step by step to safety. His actions had been precise, steady, and unhesitating. As she sat, she noticed how the others around her moved with quiet purpose. No one panicked, and each person seemed to understand the urgency of the moment. Together they had prevented further tragedy. The sense of community of people working together under pressure brought her a deep sense of comfort. She felt connected not only to the cowboy, but to everyone who had acted to keep her safe. The sun rose higher, and the heat of the morning grew stronger. Steam rose from wet areas around the barn, mixing with the smoke that still lingered. She took a deep breath, inhaling the air carefully. Her lungs still burned, but each breath felt more natural now. She realized how easily she had taken ordinary mornings for granted before, unaware of how quickly life could become uncertain. The cowboy stayed close, keeping a watchful eye on the barn and the surrounding area. Occasionally, he would gesture toward workers, giving them instructions or pointing out areas where lingering heat could be dangerous. His calm focus never wavered, a stark contrast to the chaos she had experienced just moments before. She realized that his strength lay not in force or words, but in his ability to stay steady when everything else around him was unpredictable. She finally allowed herself to glance back at the barn. Flames no longer roared, but blackened smoke rose from damaged wood. She could see the pattern of destruction, the way the fire had consumed the dry hay and old beams. She felt a mixture of sadness and awe. The barn had been destroyed, yet it had also become a reminder of how quickly courage and quick action could save lives. Her thoughts returned to the horses. Despite the fear she had felt earlier, they had survived. Watching them move cautiously now, sniffing the air and adjusting to the outside, brought her comfort. The cowboy noticed her gaze and nodded. "They'll be fine. Just need some time to calm down," he said. She smiled slightly, understanding that patience and care would heal more than just the fear she carried. It would also help the animals regain their calm. The woman's heart began to slow its racing pace as she took in the scene. The fire had been terrifying, but it had also shown her the value of presence, courage, and trust. She realized how important it was to remain calm in crisis, to focus on what could be done rather than what could go wrong. Her thoughts lingered on the moments when the flames had surrounded her, and she felt gratitude not just for being saved, but for the strength she had found within herself in that moment. Emergency responders continued their work, dousing smoldering spots and ensuring the fire would not spread to nearby areas. She watched as they worked methodically, a calm efficiency that reminded her of the cowboys' steady guidance. Every action was deliberate, every step calculated to prevent further danger. She understood now that in moments of fear, careful action was more powerful than panic or hesitation. The ranch hands began cleaning up the area around the barn. They moved charred hay, checked the animals, and assessed the damage. She joined them slowly, helping where she could, her movements careful but deliberate. Each task reminded her that life continued after danger, that the world did not stop, and that rebuilding and recovery were part of surviving. The cowboy stayed nearby, occasionally glancing her way to ensure she was all right. She appreciated his quiet attention. He did not need to speak to reassure her. His presence was enough. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, understanding that the courage he had shown had been the difference between life and death. As the morning progressed, the woman began to regain a sense of normalcy. Her breathing became steadier, and the trembling in her hands eased. She looked at the barn once more, seeing not just destruction but a place that had reminded her of the fragility of life and the power of courage. The memory of the fire, the smoke, and the heat would remain with her, but it was tempered by the relief of survival and the gratitude for those who had acted to protect her. The cowboy finally nodded toward the remaining workers, indicating that she was ready to step back and rest. She moved toward a shaded area, feeling the sun warm her skin after the cold shock of smoke and fire. She sat down slowly, taking a long drink of water and letting herself relax. Around her, life on the ranch continued, moving in a rhythm that had returned after a moment of chaos. She realized that the morning had changed her. It had reminded her that life was fragile, that danger could appear unexpectedly, and that courage and calm could save lives. She thought about the cowboy, the workers, and the firefighters who had acted so quickly. Each of them had played a part in her survival. She felt a deep sense of gratitude that could not be measured in words alone. As she watched the barn, still smoldering but under control, she understood that recovery would take time. The structure could be repaired, the animals could calm, and life could continue. But the lesson she had learned, the value of courage, the importance of trust, and the strength found in calm action, would stay with her forever. The woman took one last deep breath, filling her lungs with fresh air. The morning sun warmed her face, and for the first time since the fire began, she felt a sense of peace. The danger had passed, the smoke was clearing, and she had survived. She looked to the cowboy, giving him a small, grateful smile, knowing that his bravery and calm had carried her through the worst moments of her life. The barn had been reduced to charred wood and smoldering hay, but the morning sun shone brightly across the fields, bringing a sense of calm after the chaos. The woman sat on the ground near the fence, wrapped in a blanket, her body still trembling slightly from the adrenaline of the fire. She could hear the quiet crackling of lingering embers and the occasional hiss of water evaporating from the efforts of firefighters. Everything around her seemed peaceful now, yet she knew how close she had come to real danger. The cowboy stayed nearby, his eyes still scanning the barn and surrounding area. He didn't speak much, but his presence alone reminded her that someone had risked themselves for her safety. She realized that courage often showed itself not in grand words but in calm, steady actions. His confidence and focus had guided her out of the flames, and now, watching him, she understood how important it was to have someone you could trust in a moment of crisis. Workers continued to move around, checking on animals and cleaning up debris. Some carried buckets of water to extinguish remaining hot spots, while others guided the horses further from the barn to let them settle. The animals were still shaken, their ears flicking at every sudden sound, but with gentle handling they slowly began to relax. She watched a young foal nuzzle its mother's neck, and a sense of relief washed over her. Even after the fear, life continued, and recovery was possible. She thought about what had happened inside the barn. The smoke, the heat, the feeling of being trapped, it all came back vividly in her mind. Her chest tightened at the memory, but she also felt a strange strength. Surviving the fire had taught her something she had not known before. That fear could be faced, and that courage could carry someone through even the most dangerous moments. The cowboy approached her, brushing ash from his jacket. "How are you feeling?" he asked quietly. She looked up at him and nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I'm okay now, thanks to you." He shook his head slightly, a modest expression on his face. "You made it out. That's what matters." Gulain Neos on the execution stand. His bravery had been seek recognition for his actions.
His bravery had been silent but unwavering, and it had made all the difference.
Emergency responders had mostly finished their work by now. The fire was under control, and the smoldering barn was no longer an immediate threat. She noticed how methodical and calm the firefighters were, checking every corner and making sure no hidden flames remained. Watching them reminded her of the importance of teamwork and planning in moments of danger. Alone, she might not have survived, but together with those who acted quickly, life had been preserved. She walked slowly toward the fenced area where the horses were gathered. Their ears flicked and eyes moved nervously as she approached, but when she spoke softly, they began to relax. She ran her hands along the mane of one horse, feeling its warmth and steadiness. The simple act of touching something real and alive grounded her after the chaos inside the barn. The cowboy came to stand beside her, watching quietly as she interacted with the animals. He didn't interfere. He simply let her regain a sense of normalcy. Her thoughts drifted back to the moments when she had been trapped, feeling the flames closing in. She realized how quickly life could change, how fragile safety truly was. One second she had been performing her routine in the barn, and the next, she had been fighting to survive. Yet in the middle of fear, she had discovered her own strength. Following the cowboy, listening to his instructions, and keeping herself focused had allowed her to survive. Other ranch hands had begun cleaning up the area around the barn, moving burned hay and broken equipment. She joined them slowly, helping where she could. Every small task felt meaningful, a way to rebuild and reclaim control after the destruction. With each movement, she felt a little more steady, a little more in charge of her own life again. The sun climbed higher, and warmth replaced the earlier chill from smoke and fear. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with air that was no longer thick with smoke. The sensation was almost overwhelming, a simple act that now felt like a gift. Around her, the ranch seemed peaceful, birds chirping in the trees, horses nibbling at fresh grass, and workers moving calmly but efficiently. Life had returned. She glanced at the cowboy, who now leaned against a fence post, scanning the barn one last time. His calm confidence reminded her of the strength that had saved her. She felt gratitude swell in her chest. Words were not enough to convey what she felt, but she looked at him with an expression that spoke volumes. He nodded, understanding, his eyes reflecting steady reassurance. In the hours that followed, she and the ranch hands worked to secure the remaining animals and clear dangerous debris. The barn would need to be rebuilt, but nothing was more important than knowing everyone was safe. She moved among the workers, offering assistance and encouragement where she could. The sense of community and shared effort lifted her spirits, showing her that even after fear and danger, people could come together to restore safety and order. She remembered the sound of the fire, the crackling of burning wood, and the heat that had pressed against her. Those moments would stay in her memory forever, but now, paired with relief and survival, they also reminded her of courage, trust, and human kindness. The bravery of one person, the cowboy, had changed everything. Without his actions, she might not have survived. As the morning moved into afternoon, she took a moment to sit and reflect. The smell of smoke still lingered faintly, and the charred barn stood as a reminder of what had happened. But she felt a new appreciation for life, for the people around her, and for the strength she had discovered within herself. Surviving had been terrifying, but it had also been transformative. The animals, now calm and grazing peacefully, provided a sense of normalcy. The workers continued their tasks efficiently, guided by experience and teamwork. She realized that recovery was not just about repairing the barn or moving the animals. It was also about rebuilding confidence and trust in life itself. She had been tested by fire, and she had emerged stronger, more aware of both danger and hope. The cowboy approached her once more, offering another sip of water. She accepted it gratefully, feeling her body relax further with each cool drop. He didn't speak much, but his presence was enough. He had done what needed to be done when it mattered most, and his quiet courage had been the anchor in the chaos. She felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude that would remain with her forever. As the smoke continued to clear and the sun warmed the fields, she realized how much the morning had changed her perspective. Life could shift in an instant, but so could hope and courage. She understood the value of staying calm, following guidance, and trusting others when danger arises. Those lessons were now part of her, as real as the scars left on the barn and as vivid as the memory of escaping the flames. By the time the ranch had settled into a slower rhythm again, she felt steady on her feet. The fear and adrenaline had faded, replaced by gratitude and awareness. She looked at the barn, blackened and damaged but standing, and knew that recovery, both physical and emotional, was possible. She had survived, and that survival carried lessons she would never forget. The cowboy finally began walking toward his truck, signaling that the immediate danger was over. She watched him go, knowing that his bravery had made the difference between life and death. Around her, the ranch returned to its normal pace, but the morning's events would leave a lasting impact on everyone who had witnessed them. Sitting on the grass, the woman took a deep, steady breath. The fire had tested her, and the courage of another had saved her. She realized that life was fragile, but human strength, bravery, and compassion were powerful forces. She had survived the flames, and in doing so, she had discovered the resilience not only of others, but of herself. As she rose to help with the cleanup one last time, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The barn could be rebuilt, the animals would recover, and the ranch would continue. More importantly, she had learned what courage and trust looked like in action, and she would carry that knowledge with her for the rest of her life.